I call this lesson today release. And the reason I did that is because, as I was telling Karen, I had a battle pulling weeds in my backyard and the weeds won. And I limped myself into the house and my low back was in full spasms. And I was yelling. And so I did what I needed to do and I rested and I did some Feldenkrais lessons and it got better. And then I found out I'd also damaged some tendons on my hip. So I worked on that. And this lesson is one I went to, and it's one you do in a chair. So it's one of those lovely mobile lessons you can take with you anywhere, and you can do 2 minutes of it or 5 minutes of it somewhere. And I think the release that you will feel is amazing. It doesn't have to be major muscle damage like I had. It could just be the stress of the day, or maybe you just deposited some tension somewhere in your low back or hips, but let's try it. So what you need today is a chair, and I'd prefer it not be a padded, soft, pushy chair. It can have a hard wood seat or it can have a slightly padded seat. And if you don't have arms, that's good. If it does have arms, that's okay. But just a sturdy chair that you can sit on and feel like you're going to stay there and be able to feel yourself. So we're going to start with you sitting at the back of your chair. So back up against the back of your chair and feel how your back touches the back of the chair and where it touches. And then notice your two sit bones. Your sit bones, I tell people, are like teacup handles. You know how a teacup handle looks like a little half circle? Well, your sit bone sits on the rounded part of that teacup handle, and you can actually roll forward and backward on that teacup handle. But right now, I just want you to feel those two sit bones on the left and right. And if you need to, you can put a hand under your bottom on the left with your left hand and one on the right hand and feel where they are. Because what I want you to notice is, are you sitting on the curve of the teacup or towards the front or back of it, of that teacup handle? Where are you on those sit bones? And in Feldenkrais, sometimes we say, I don't know, because we don't know. We can't tell. But see if you can tell. And breathe. And then notice, do you have more weight on the left side or the right side? It may be even, but it's not always even. And then to move to the front of your chair, here's our fancy Feldenkrais way of moving. Lift your right hip a little from the chair and then take that knee forward and lean a little to the left. And then lean on the right hip and take the left hip forward. We call it the butt walk. And you work your way up to the front of the chair and find a spot up there. Again, you've got those two sit bones you're feeling yourself settled on. And now what I'd like you to do is to roll your pelvis forward. And what that's going to do, and we're going to talk an inch or half an inch, your belly will come a little forward, slow, 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 just one. Slowly forward. Your lower back is going to arch a little bit, just a little bit. And then you're going to come back. So you're just rolling from the center of that sit bone to the front of it, just a little bit. Try it again slowly. Nice. Now, while you're doing that, can you let your jaw be soft? Yeah. It's just a gentle roll forward. Breathe. Nice soft breath. And then back. Now, I'm going to tell you, I have had clients who have said, I can't roll forward or I can't roll backward. But right now we're going to try forward just a few more times. Easy, slow, slow, half speed. Even slower. There you go. Nice. The world won't change with these little movements, but your nervous system may. Easy does it. Let your breath continue soft and easy. And stop in the middle. And just let your breath come in and out. If you have other training, you may have a special way you want to breathe. In Feldenkrais, we just like the breath to be soft. And now, can you roll behind that sit bone? Your belly will go back, your low back will round a little bit, and then you'll come back to the center. Now, if this is hard, you can push on your heels to take you back a little bit. But it is a tiny little movement. You all are doing it so nicely. It's easy does it. Keep breathing. And as you do it, notice if anything changes in the upper part of your left leg or the upper part of your right leg. You're just going back into the center, ever so tiny. It takes some patience because it is a small movement. And stop in the middle and just breathe. Just feel the air coming in and out. And now let's put those two together and notice what changes in your vertebrae in your spine as you go a little forward and back to the center, and then a little back. It's your pelvis turning, it's your low back arching and then rounding. Remember, when you're doing Feldenkrais, if anything hurts, you can always do it smaller, or you can stop completely and do it in your imagination. A few more times forward, slow and easy. Stop in the center and breathe, and then back. And then when you're back in the center, breathe and take yourself back to the back of your chair and just rest a minute. Just let your eyes close. And as you breathe in, notice if the breath coming in brings your chest up a little, and the breath going out lets your chest sink a little. If it doesn't, that's fine, but if it can, that's good. In these rest periods, your nervous system pays attention to differences. That's when we learn, and that's when we can override habits. Okay, bring yourself back to the front of the chair. And once or twice, just take yourself forward slowly and back slowly. And notice if your head is moving as you do it this time. Is there any change in the position of your head and neck as you slowly go forward and back? And then stop in the center. And now you're going to go forward again, but I want you to turn just a little and go forward over your left leg. You're going to get heavier on your left sit bone, and you're going to rock forward over your left leg and come back to the center. So you're rocking your pelvis, arching your low back and going over that left leg. And then you're going to come back a little to the center. It's an easy movement. Again, is something moving in your head as you go forward? Notice what you might be holding tight. We are different on our left and right sides. And stop in the middle and breathe. And then turn your pelvis a little bit and go forward over your right leg. Notice if that is easier or harder. Is there anything holding you back on the right side? Can you breathe into anything that's tight in your neck or jaw? Easy little movements to the right. Notice what your right shoulder is doing as you go to the right. Is it moving with you? Is it going forward? Is it holding back? And come back to the center and just sit in the middle and rest a minute. Feel your ribs move as your sternum goes forward in front of you as you breathe in. And then as you exhale, feel your sternum sinking back towards your spine. The term rib cage bothers us in Feldenkrais because the ribs are flexible and can move. Remember that that sternum can carry those ribs forward, and that sternum can carry those ribs back. And now we're going to alternate. We're going to put those two together. Rock your pelvis forward to the left slowly and easily, feeling the weight shift to the left buttocks. And then rock back to the center. And then rock your pelvis to the right. And feel the weight shift to your right buttocks. And come back. And do that again, noticing what your head wants to do as you go left and you go right. The movement of your head is pretty much dependent on how much freedom you have in your neck. Just see what it wants to do. Easy does it. And when you get back to the center, walk yourself back to the back of your chair. Let your back rest against the back of your chair. Notice how it's contacting the chair now, how your weight is distributed. That much of what you've done, you can do anytime on any day to help free up some of that tightness that can center when we have tension or trauma. But Feldenkrais is a method of experiment, so let's do a little more. Come to the front. We're going to stay small. And I want you to imagine you're sitting on a clock. Not a digital clock, an old-fashioned clock, like maybe your grandmother had, or they had in your school classroom, big old clock. And in front of you is number 12, and behind you is number 6. So you're sitting on that clock, and can you rock your pelvis forward to number 12, arching your low back a little bit, letting your chest fill with air, and then rock back to the center, right in the middle of the clock, and breathe, and then rock back to number 6, and round your low back. Exhale, and maybe even let your head come down a little bit, and your shoulders soften. And come back to the center. Stop in the center and breathe. And then rock forward to 12. Your low back arches. You inhale, maybe your shoulders come up. And then come back. Stop in the center and breathe, and then go back to number 6. One more time up to number 12. It is hard sometimes to go slow, but it's how your nervous system learns. I'm sure you've heard some of those television commercials where the guys talk so fast you can't even hear them. If you do movements really fast, your nervous system can't hear them either. So that's why we go so slow. And do less. And stop in the middle and rest. So that's the main movement of the clock, up to 12 and 6. Now, if you're sitting on the clock and 12 is in front of you, 9 will be to your left. 12, like this. So can you shift your weight in your pelvis to your left hip and move towards 9 on your clock? And everybody will say, sure, but pay attention to it and then come back to the center. Maybe your 9 went up a little bit, or maybe your 9 went back a little bit. Take your time and go slowly to the left. Wherever your 9 is okay. There's no right and wrong in Feldenkrais. And come back to the center and breathe. And then back to number 9 and breathe. And continue going to the left and the center. Feel your weight shifting. And now here's a curious question. as you go to the left, what happens to your ribs on the left? Are they getting farther apart or closer together? And then stop in the middle. And now we found 9 o'clock. 12 is straight ahead. 3 is going to be to the right. So now can you shift to the right? And the answer is maybe. And is it different than going left? Little shift to the right. Keep breathing softly. And back to the center. It's almost a slide. Your weight pours over to that right hip. And what happens to the right ribs as your hips go to the right? Your weight goes to the right. And what happens to the left ribs when your weight goes to the right? Your ribs will usually do the opposite. And stop in the center and breathe. Easy does it. Some of the most powerful muscles in your body are centered around your hips and buttocks. And we want them to be able to move easily. So now shift to the left to 9 o'clock. Come back to the center. And then shift to the right to 3 o'clock. And come back to the center. Try that once more. Over to 9. And notice if the pressure of your feet on the floor changes as you shift to one side to the other. And then back to 3. And the center. And walk back to the back of your chair. And rest. And as you breathe easily there in the back of your chair, notice your level of comfort. My friend says if you were sitting in church and you had an especially long-winded preacher, could you sit there for another good 30 minutes and be comfortable? So imagine you've already been there for a good while sitting, and could you sit for another 30 minutes? How much comfort do you have in sitting now? And where is your back touching the back of the chair? How is the weight balanced in your hips? Is it still heavy on one side or the other? Let your breathing be soft. And then come to the front of the chair. Now, this lesson is called the pelvic clock, and you've now found 12 and 6, so go from 12 to 6 now, forward to 12, back to the center, and back to 6. Remember, it's your pelvis moving. 4 to 12, back to the center, and back to 6. When you get to the center again, stop. And now go left to 9, and back to the center, and right to 6, and back to the center. There are literally dozens of lessons in Feldenkrais that use this pelvic clock. And you have the 4 quadrants that you've learned today. I want to teach you how to use a little bit of what goes from there, but just a little bit, because it is a powerful lesson and it would be good for you to rest after this. So take yourself forward to 12. And now instead of going straight back, think of going around the clock face to get to 3. So you're forward and you're going to rock towards the right, hopefully in a rounded arc until you get to 3 and stop and breathe. And then come back from 3 to 2 to 1 to 12 and back to the center and rest. As you play with this clock and let it be an exploration, you will find that some parts of it may be very tight, some parts of it may even be painful, some parts will be perfectly round, other parts you might just cut straight across. But let's try that one more time. Up to 12, and then around the clock to 1, to 2, to 3, and stop there, and breathe, and then back around to 2, to 1, to 12, and rest. Easy does it. And then take yourself back to 6, so your low back rounds. And from 6, go around the clock to 7, 8, and 9. Let your jaw be soft. Stop at 9 and breathe. And then come back to 8, 7, 6, and come back to the center and rest. Just rest. Just breathe. This is sort of a curious question, but notice the presence of your bottom of your feet on the floor. Do you notice any difference in how your feet feel against the surface of the floor or the carpet that you're on? Sometimes moving your hips changes how all of your muscles and tendons react to stimuli. Now, you can take this clock and continue it at any time and work on it, but I want to show you a little piece of a clock lesson that has been so beneficial to me. So sit at the front of your chair, and just like we did before, rock your pelvis and go to 12, but as you do it, take your knees apart a little bit. And then when you come back to the center, bring your knees back to their normal position. So you're rocking your pelvis forward, your low back is rounding, and you open your knees a little bit. And notice, just notice what happens in your head and neck. Is there a tendency to let your eyes and head come up a little bit? Maybe your chin comes up as you inhale forward and your knees open. And then exhale and come back to the center. And then go forward and open your knees and inhale. Let your shoulders roll back. Let your chin come up. Feel your chest widen. And then come back to the center. This is one of the most soothing movements that I have found in all of Feldenkrais. When I get tired, I will sit down and stop and rock forward and open my knees and let my shoulders come back, breathe in, let my head and eyes come up, and then exhale and rock back. It is a small, slow, easy movement, but it will soothe your low back and your hips. Try it one more time. As you open your knees, you're moving your hips and you're rocking your pelvis forward into that opening. And then as you close your knees, you're closing your hips and bringing your pelvis back to center. Breathe. Let your mouth be soft. There are lots of people you can pay lots of money to help with tension in your low back and hips. But I believe this lesson is one of the most helpful things you can do for yourself. Opening those knees and rocking that pelvis forward, and then closing those knees and bringing your hips back together. And now go to the back of your chair and rest for a minute. Pay attention to your breathing. Notice if there's a change in your jaw and neck. How about how your shoulders are against the back of the chair? And that low back and hip area that gets so much work. As you breathe in, can you feel that move a little bit now? Let your ribs open up as you breathe in. Let your ribs slide back as you exhale. Easy does it. Easy does it. Now, there's lots more that you can do with this lesson, but I'm going to tell you what a wise lady told me once. Sometimes enough is enough. But I am going to ask you if you would go walk a little bit around in your house and then come back and give me some input as to what you notice when you walk. So stand up and walk a little bit, see how that goes, and then come up and just notice what you notice. A lot more freedom. I can turn this way now. Does the title fit?
Does the title fit?
I call this lesson Release.
Yes.
Does that make sense now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It has been a godsend to me I started this lesson after my first hip surgery in '98. And it has been my go-to lesson ever since then. There's more to it, but I don't need to override your brain. How was your walking?
There was a lot more space in my sacrum and my hip that I wasn't even, I guess it wasn't there before, but there was definitely a lot more space there as I was moving and walking.
Good. As the day goes on, if you get to walk a little more, notice the length of your stride and how far apart your feet are. Those two things may change or they may not. You know, it just depends, as you say, on how much space there is around your sacrum and your hip area. I see nice breaths there. If nothing else, if it gives you a nice breath, then that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And I really don't want to cut you short, but I think that's enough for your nervous system at one time. And take that with you. And I imagine Karen will post the recordings.
Yes.
And then you can do it again and again. We always do the clock in quadrants. You noticed I did the upper left quadrant of the clock and then the lower right. We do them across from each other. And if you get adventurous, you can do the other two quadrants of the clock. And I will be surprised if you don't find that one section goes nicely and the other one goes, There's always some little spot in most of us that is not rolling very well. You know, it starts out, but it just doesn't. And that's the part where you go even slower. And don't pass any judgment. Just experiment with it. Can I take this so slowly that I can keep it round? Oh, maybe not today. Maybe the next time I try it. So that's the pelvic clock, and it's a classic lesson that Moshe Feldenkrais developed. I think he had an incredible understanding of anatomy, and he felt like it would make a world of difference. And it has for me, and I hope it will for you. Thank you for letting me be a part of your day. Go in grace.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You are welcome. I enjoyed it. And if you can rest now or take a walk, that will help this lesson to stay with your nervous system.